Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Mirza Hamiez bin Khairulfaezin from class AS 120E. In this video, I'm going to talk about rechargeable battery. What is a rechargeable battery? A rechargeable battery, storage battery or secondary cell is a type of electrical battery which can be charged, discharged into a load and recharged many times, as opposed to disposable or primary battery which is supplied fully charged and discarded after use. Next, how does battery work? The flow of electrons from one material, which is electrode, to another through an external circuit. The flow of electrons provides an electric current that can be used to do work. To balance the flow of electrons, charged ions also flow through an electrolyte solution that is in contact with both electrodes. So, what we can see is there's two electrodes and electrolyte to work together. Now, what is electrodes? Electrodes is the electrons flow from one electrode called the anode to another electrode called the cathode. Now, the anode is for negative electrode and the cathode is for the positive electrode. So the electrode used to flow the ions. The electrode used to flow the electron from one to another, from anode to cathode. Next is electrolyte. An electrolyte can be a liquid, gel, or a solid substance, but it must be able to allow the movement of charged ion. So basically, electrolyte should be a substance that can transfer electricity, such as water solution or metal. Next, what actually happens in the anode or cathode? Now, at the anode, the electrodes react with the electrolyte, which can be salt water or regular water, in a reaction that produces electrons. These electrons accumulate at the anode. Next, what happens in the cathode? At the cathode, another chemical reaction occurs simultaneously that enables the electrodes to accept electron. So both reactions do work at the same time. It occurs at the same time. The anode flow the electrons to the cathode and the cathode receive it at the same time. Right. The technical chemical terms for a reaction that involves the exchange of electrons is a oxidation reduction, more commonly called redox reaction. Now, what is redox? Redox stands for reduction oxidation. Now, reduction means reduction is the gain of electrons and is what occurs at the cathode. We say that the cathode is reduced during the reaction. So now the cathode is the one that receives electrons. So the process there called reduction. Now, oxidation is the loss of electron. Now, the flow of electron that is transferred. So let's say zinc it oxidizes. So the electrons in the zinc is transferred to the cathode that receive the electron. Now that's called oxidation. Now both of these occurs at the same time. Each of these reactions has a particular standard potential. Think of this characteristic as the reaction ability or efficiency to either produce or suck up electron, its strength in an electron tug of war. Because it's a cycle that keeps going until the electron in the anode dry out. That there's no more electron in the anode. Next. As you can see here, we can see the zinc oxidize, which means it loses electrons, which are in turn gained by the ions in the water, process called reduction, producing hydrogen gas. And then the oxidation reduction cycle creates a flow of electron. A flow, because the zinc keeps giving electron, and the copper, which is cathode, receives electrons simultaneously and at the same time. When you hook a light bulb between the two, between the flow of the electrons, it will give it power. The light bulb will light up because it receives electricity from the process. Alright. So now, from that explanation, that is how battery works. The metal oxidizes, the anode oxidizes, and the cathode receive more electrons in the process called reduction. So what's the problem here is that after the anode loses all of its electron, the battery cannot be used after that because there's no more use for it. So it's a one-time cycle. You cannot use it again. Okay, this is where rechargeable battery come. Now, why we need a rechargeable battery? Because some common batteries are single-use only, like I said. The trip the electron takes from the anode over to the cathode is one way, because it's gonna be reverse. Their electrodes become depleted. You see, the electrodes, there's anode and cathode. The anode depleted, and then the battery ends up in the bin. Now, what happens when recharging a battery? Now, is it the act of recharging a battery, recharging a used battery can be possible because flow of ions and electrons, as it takes place in some types of batteries, can also go backwards. So it's possible for the flow of redox to be reversed. Now what happens after that is the battery back to its starting point and giving it a whole new lease of life. That means after you recharge the battery, it can be used again, but it's not going to be perfect. I'm going to talk about it later. Process. So what's process involved in recharging a battery? Reversing the oxidation reduction process that occurred during discharge. So a battery keeps discharging because the flow of electrons keeps happening, even though you cannot see it. Alright? Now what we're going to do in recharging a battery is connect an almost flat battery to an external electricity source. So what we do is we charge again. We input an electricity to the battery. Now energy is sent back into the battery to regenerate the metal. Now in this reversing redox in the battery, the electrons in the cathode flows back into the anode. This sends the positive ions released from the anode into the electrolyte back to the anode. So the electrolyte suck up the positive ions released from the anode, and in this recharging process, the electrolyte gives back the positive ions from electrolyte to the original anode. Now the electrons that the cathode took in also back to the anode. From the cathode, first when it receives electricity, it gives back what it takes from anode and transfer back the electrons to the anode. And that's all from me. Thank you for listening to the entire video.